Deadman Mode, an attempt by Jagex to take RuneScape into the world of esports. While Deadman Mode had a lot of issues, and while it had a lot of improvements over the years, I wanna go over why Deadman Mode, no matter the effort, was always doomed to fail. Deadman Mode is a game mode where you progress through RuneScape with the caveat that everywhere you go, with the exception of safe zones, is PvP. Now, I don't want to get into the minutiae of what rules there are, especially because ever since my first video on Deadman Mode came out, a lot of the rules have been changed. The important point to retain here is simple. It's normal RuneScape, but you have PvP everywhere, and if you die, you lose both HP and valuable items. This is important for us to know so we can establish a groundwork and make it easier to understand why it failed. If we want to look at why Deadman Mode failed, we need to look at the core components of why that was. The first component is the vertical progression. With RuneScape, a lot of your power comes from the progress you make in-game, higher levels, better gear, better spells, etc. The main issue with this is simply the fact that Deadman Mode rewards players that spend a lot of time in the game, not players that are good at the game. While sometimes this can go hand in hand, because the more time you spend at something the better you become at it, the game mode still vastly rewards the time spent in the game. When contrasted with League of Legends, for example, you don't start the game at level 10 while your opponents start at level 1. Everyone starts at level 1 and everyone goes from there, meaning most of the outcome from the game is related to your skill level, not with how long you have spent grinding levels on that account. The second core component is the long seasons. Deadman Mode is based on RuneScape, and when it comes to accruing progress and rewards, it takes time. While a game of League of Legends lasts on average between 20 to 30 minutes, an average Deadman Mode session can take up hours. Deadman Mode seasons also take several weeks to conclude. Not only is this a big ask for a lot of casual players, but it's also a big ask for veteran players that see their progress wiped out time and time again, season after season. The issue here is that at its core, RuneScape is an MMORPG, meaning the entire gameplay structure of it all is pointed to gaining rewards and not losing them, while most PvP games are based on gaining advantages that can win you that specific game, advantages that won't matter in the next game because those advantages will inherently be different. This in practice means you lose casual players because no casual player wants to spend that much time in the game, and due to the vertical progression, even if they do, they will still be at a disadvantage because if they don't spend as much as other players, they will still be at that disadvantage. But also, veteran players will inevitably end up burning out from the game mode entirely due to the commitment that it's required for it. Another core issue is the clanman mode. As players grew wiser with the game mode, a lot of clans started forming, and this led to certain factions controlling certain parts of the game. Meaning, again, your skill actually doesn't matter. Not only can you not compete against the sheer numbers of clans as a solo player, but also you can't even get the best items because most clans would just park themselves in places where you would get them. Another core issue is the fact that Deadman Mode is an ever-changing affair. Deadman Mode just kept changing and changing. While change is good and it can keep the game fresh, something that never changes is the identity of the game. If we look at CS, for instance, it's about winning by eliminating the other team. League of Legends is about winning by destroying the enemy nexus. Rocket League is about winning by scoring goals. You can add weapons, change maps, add items, but the goal essentially remains the same. The core identity remains the same. While with Deadman Mode, the first few seasons it was about getting gear and leveling up to then maybe have a chance at surviving the end fog battle royale style thing, and nowadays that only happens until we have enough people to do 1v1s. The way you go about getting gear also changed, the rules around losing items and XP also changed, core ideas changed completely to try and fix the problems we've already talked before, when at its core the game mode was already doomed. Another core issue, as if all of those weren't enough, the DDoSing. Yeah, look, this one should be pretty obvious. Any technical problems that happen when on any competition is bound to draw some ire from the players and demotivate anyone from taking part in a competition. Imagine spending weeks grinding for something just to get disconnected during the last hour, which is something that tends to happen quite a lot. The major issue here is that Deadman Mode has been hit with DDoSing so much, it's always a surprise when that doesn't happen. Although other competitions deal with DDoSing in a final, well, they have people on stage, so there's plenty of solutions you can find. Deadman Mode is played online because you cannot have 2000 people in a stage. And even if you could, again, most other games do not require you to grind for weeks in order to get to the point where you were before. You can just repeat a CS game and you lose, what, half an hour, maybe an hour? Same with League of Legends. Deadman Mode, you don't want to repeat a few weeks. Another core issue is something that I named miscellaneous. Ultimately, we kinda had more issues than just DDoSing as well. We have Modjet, for example, leaking important info to clan members favoring a certain group of players, Wooks winning but being disqualified even though it technically actually followed all of the established rules, Worlds being inaccessible during finals for people that actually qualified, you know, people competing on stage being all dead, not making the event all that fun to watch, you know, all of this while having money on the line. These might be small things, but when you put them together as a whole, it doesn't really paint Deadman Mode as a very fun event to compete or to watch. And lastly, the lack of support by Jagex. While Jagex did have a budget to support Deadman Mode, they didn't show much more support than that. It has been made pretty clear that throwing money at something won't make it a serious competition in the long term. This is exactly the reason as to why games like Age of Empires 2 have a pretty active competitive scene, despite maybe not being super popular, and Fortnite, which has $100 million thrown at it, is almost really never talked about when it comes to the king of esports. For Deadman Mode, this meant that outside of seasons, there was no hype or support, there was no easy system for people to follow the competitors, and as far as the game mode goes, there was no effort to make it more accessible. I think there are three core ideas that any sport should have in order to create a competitive scene. The first one, replayability. One of the most important factors to any competitive game is the ability to practice it. Most competitive games have two things that Deadman Mode unfortunately lacks. Number one is the replayability. Games last between 20 to 30 minutes and it's mostly reliant on skill, not building an account. The other aspect is that the game modes, the competitive ones, are available at all times, save for some exceptions. Deadman Mode Seasonal only comes around every couple of months. This just makes it hard for players to be invested, both from a gameplay perspective and from a following perspective. Deadman Mode is more reliant on the amount of time played rather than how good and knowledgeable you are at the game. This demotivates anyone wanting to play a game mode whose identity is entirely about competitiveness. Even if you are really good at the game, if you only have 1 hour to spend versus someone who spends 12 hours every day, you're not gonna beat them. The second idea is accessibility. Alongside not being able to access the game to practice whenever you want, we also have the problem of following the game mode itself. Outside of the videos that players make, where do you watch it? Where do you go to see the news about it? Where do you engage with it outside of the finals? This is important for any competition to allow fans to know and understand what's going on, to make it easy to watch and follow. Without this, people just only care about the game during the finals or when other players make videos or stream it. The problem here is that unless you enjoy that particular content creator, you probably won't watch them. It all increases the motivation people have when it comes to being interested in the competition as a whole, which also means you will have less players willing to try the game mode itself. And the last core idea I want to talk about is the supportability. This is mostly related to Jagex. Any esport needs support, and unfortunately Jagex has been really bad at this. When it comes to the development, it is done by the normal JMods, which take time off from other content to develop it. Outside of the actual game mode itself, you have no tools that make the viewing experience better, that allow you to practice or that allow you to follow what is going on in the competition. Outside of the game mode, we get nothing of the sorts, and have to entirely rely on people playing the game mode to know what's going on to begin with, which makes it really hard to become interested in the competition. It absolutely can, and we already have some game modes that would lend themselves well to competitiveness. We could pick an handful, but honestly my personal bet would be the PvP arena. Can you just practice your 1v1s whenever you want? Yes. Can you easily access it? Yes. There's ranking systems, you can look at the current match, and you have a loadout system you can choose from. Does it have support? No, unfortunately, but it would be much easier to improve the viewing experience and add supportive tools to a much more concise competitive game mode such as the PvP arena than it is to Deadman Mode. We can go even further and allow people to do series by picking multiple disciplines such as Tribrid, Zerk, Pure, for example. We can go even further and push a pure PvP client. We can add tools such as replays and specific balancing patches purely for PvP. We can add queue systems and so on and so on. There's a lot we can do with PvP minigames already present in the game. We really just need Jagex to properly support them, hold monthly tournaments or give people the tools to do it. It is much easier to hold LAN tournaments as well and slowly build a culture that is competitive in nature. Because without a culture that is competitive, it doesn't matter how many Deadman modes you do, you won't ever make it a serious competition. And on top of that, what about Deadman Mode then? Well, as I have mentioned in a ramble, I think that it should just be a seasonal game mode much how leagues are. Essentially a fun PvP game mode that people do every season, and that's pretty much it. I think it would go down much better and people wouldn't see it as a waste of time as much as they do it now.